Hey, Pure Youth, this is Connor. Just wanted to thank everyone who's been posting videos on the different chapters through Daniel. It's been super fun for me, and I know fun for many of us, just venturing through this book and having this reading plan available to us. So I just want to take some time to kind of wrap up the book of Daniel and summarize some things that God really showed me kind of through the book as a whole. And I also want to inform you guys about the next reading plan that we're going to have starting tomorrow. So before I get to that, there's three things that I learned specifically from the character of Daniel. And then there's three things that I learned about the character of God. I just want to highlight those things that seem so clear throughout the book of Daniel. So the reason why we started this book of Daniel was because it was a book that showed us what does it look like to navigate through the changes, challenges, and confusions of our life. And Daniel was familiar with all three of those things. He saw drastic change in his life. He faced many different challenges. And let's just say there was a lot of things that came across confusing. But Daniel, first we see that he was a man who displayed dependence. And not dependence on himself, but he was dependent upon God in all that he did. We see that he was a man of prayer. And we see that he actually prayed 3 times a day, and that was his normal routine. And he didn't pray because he was trying to check something off the list. He prayed because he knew that he needed God. He needed God in all things. And he was constantly going to God. He was constantly depending on the Spirit of God to guide him and lead him and empower him and give him wisdom. And we see specifically that Daniel, in his dependence of God, is known for being a man who had, as the pagans referred to him, a man that had the spirit of the gods. But we know that that's the one true Spirit of God that guided Daniel. We see that Daniel also was a man who displayed humility through all of this. And this is connected to dependence, but even more so, I think you can be dependent on God, but still kind of be prideful and arrogant in that. But Daniel here, we see he had humility because he faced a lot of different things, and he never acted like he had the answers, and he never took the credit himself. He always gave credit to the God of gods, the God most high, the God of heaven. And we see that he showed humility because Daniel, not only was he trying to interpret other people's dreams that were confusing, but he himself had all these different visions that I'm sure all of you read through and are like, what is going on? And guess what? Daniel was confused a lot as well, but he was humble enough to ask God questions. He was humble enough to seek understanding. He was humble enough to even admit, hey, even after receiving an answer from God, I still don't know what's going on. And we see, lastly, that Daniel was a man that displayed surrender. Daniel wasn't caught up in his own life. He wasn't caught up in his own concerns. He was surrendering ultimately to God. And when he depended on God in prayer, and when he was humble before God, seeking counsel, we see that Daniel surrendered himself in obedience to God, and he responded to God. And he looked for opportunities, and he was purposeful to reach the people around him and to show others the greatness of God. So those are 3 things we noticed about Daniel. He was dependent, he was humble, and he surrendered to God. 3 things that I learned about God through the book of Daniel was that God is present. It's easy for us, especially in trials, to think that God is absent, that he's uninvolved, that he's unengaged, and he's just up in the clouds, sitting on some chair, looking down on us miles and miles away. But we see in the book of Daniel that God is very present, whether it is sending an angel, whether it's communicating through a vision, whether it's giving a character a dream, whether it's God himself speaking, God is engaged. And that is an amazing thing. And God is present and God is relational. And Daniel sees this time and time again. As Daniel is dependent in prayer, God is faithful and he responds. God makes himself known. We also see that God is mysterious. And this is one thing that I personally struggle with, but it's a truth, and it's a beautiful truth, a deep truth about the character of God. God cannot be fully understood, and that's just what makes him so amazing. One wise man once told me that God is meant to be loved and not understood. And I think that that is so fitting and so practical, because God is truly beyond us and we cannot wrap our minds around him. And especially in confusing times like this, we want answers, right? We want to know what God is doing in the background. We want to see what he's up to. But the reality is God is a mystery, and there's certain things that we just can't know fully. And that's okay. And Daniel understood this. So God is a mystery. But not only that, but we see that God is sovereign. There's a lot of different kings that are displayed through the book of Daniel, and most of them are, pretty crazy. Most of them are pretty prideful, and they show us a pretty good idea of what a wrong, poor, unwise king looks like. But we see God himself is a sovereign, good, and wise king. So even though we may not be able to fully understand everything he's doing, he's still in control, and we can rest in that. And when all of life is falling apart and is in shambles, we can hold on to this truth that our God, the names that Daniel uses, that he is the God of gods, he's the King of kings, he is the God of heaven, he's the God most high, he is the Ancient of Days. So no matter what time of history, no matter what is going on, no matter what the problem is, God is sovereign over all of those things. So I hope those thoughts are helpful for you guys as we wrap up the book of Daniel. And since there's not a specific reading plan for today, I encourage you guys to go back to the book of Daniel. Look for highlights. Look for things that stood out to you. Maybe even, grab your phone or grab your laptop and just listen to it audibly. That's something that I love to do, and listen through the full book of Daniel one more time just to get kind of a final understanding of what God might be wanting to teach you. And starting tomorrow, I'm very excited to let us know that we're going to be starting a plan that's going to be focused on the Holy Week. We know that Palm Sunday just happened, and now we enter into the time of remembering Jesus leading up to his death. So starting tomorrow and going on till next Tuesday, we'll be addressing and sitting with Jesus approaching his death, but also celebrating the resurrection as Easter, one of, if not the greatest event in history is about to take place. And we get to celebrate that. Or I guess it already has taken place, but we get to relive it together. So I'm excited to relive and revisit that in this reading plan. So stay tuned. An email will be going out later today to staff and students and parents that will have all the information for that new reading plan. And stay tuned for new videos from staff, students, and parents. Love you guys, and peace to you.